Bigger Talks, Bigger Talks. We're back again with another incredible episode, and I'm so excited to have this conversation, spiritual conversation, with Miss Heather Ivany. She's a spiritual mentor, a yogi, and I will say she's a space holder for the Akashic Records, for people, for businesses, for life, for all the things in between. Heather, welcome to Bigger Talks podcast. How are you today?
I'm great. What a beautiful introduction, Eric. Honored to be in your presence and to be hanging out with your listeners today and to see where the road takes us.
Yeah, so let's get into it. I want to start with a quote I got off your website, and the quote goes, "Modern life is frantic and disjointed, but you don't have to be." What does that mean? Can you unpack that for us?
I think the biggest pull for me in answering that is that there's so much that pulls us into the periphery. And when we can access a strong reservoir of tools within ourselves to remind ourselves and direct ourselves back towards the midline, then it's almost like we get to be the eye of the storm. There's a lot of frenetic energy and frantic energy that can be outside of us and even in close. But the eye of the storm is very quiet. It can be very balanced. It can be quite still and stable. And not that that's a hierarchy over the loud, the intense, the busy, but it's just that we get choice, essentially. We don't have to be conditioned and pulled into the frenzy energy that we see every day.
Yeah, choice is everything. I mean, we choose every thought, every moment. And I think sometimes our unconscious mind chooses for us when we're not aware. But from your perspective, how did you get into, choosing your life as a spiritual mentor and becoming who you are today to help people evolve their soul and get to a higher level of their purpose while they're here in this lifetime?
From a very sort of follow the breadcrumbs kind of direction, right? So there was no part of me in my early 20s and late teens that was thinking I would be sitting in my mid 40s as a spiritual mentor. And even sitting in the seat of that, I do have trepidation with even the labeling and the languaging of it. So I use it as a means for people to give reference and direction as to how to locate me. But it's definitely not what I want to be plugged into and contained into. To answer it a little bit more concretely, I started off leaning into the spiritual realm quite young. I had a background of growing up in the church, the Catholic Church. And although I enjoyed the non-physical invitation, I didn't like the context in which it was offered to me. I'm a very kinesthetic person. I experience a lot of essence and soul through movement. And so sitting in a church pew on a Sunday just was really hard for me to do. It didn't tap.
Like that's your thing. I always say movement is medicine, but I like that.
It is. It's a great tagline to have for anything. And so as I got older into my teens, I started to have more pull into nature. I live in Canada, and at the time I was maybe 3 hours from the mountains. So I just dived there as often as I could. And anytime I could be hiking or snowboarding or playing and sitting and camping in nature, that's when I started to really feel like the hum and the draw. And then it kind of flowed into my mid-20s. I worked with a rappelling unit in a forest firefighting situation where I was oftentimes like the lone female with up to like 100 men on camp. I was heavily into the masculine. Layered on top, underneath that was just I had an upbringing with two older brothers. So there was a real like drive to be comfortable in the masculine. But it was almost to a point where I could feel myself like the light dimming. So very spontaneously, I had a girlfriend give me a book on yoga that I took into the field with me. And I started to self-teach some yoga poses while we were just waiting for a smoke. And then the crew that I was working with, you get bored hanging around a machine 10 hours a day. So they were up for anything outside of, after the couple hours of hacky sack that we'd be doing. So then I started teaching them and I really enjoyed it. And initially I went into it thinking that it was just a nice way to perhaps create a vocation in the form of the physical without deteriorating the joints and the muscles to the degree that some of the other physical experiences that I had, I could see happening if you stayed with it for super long. So this is back when like step aerobics was a big thing. And I used to do a lot of step aerobics.
And that's what I was saying, just to get some context, what year was this for you? Because I feel like this is a turning point into who you are today.
Yeah, so this would have been like early 2000s when I was doing forest firefighting. And so then I leaned into the yoga teacher training. And what I was really blown away with is I thought I was going in to learn the postures and the poses. But then I could really see that the previous experience that I had teaching and leading through coaching and working as like an outdoor leader, that came in. I could see that I didn't even know, this is how naive I was. I didn't even know that there was a link between meditation and yoga poses. So when we were doing meditation exercises, I already had my own practice of meditation, not knowing that the two were interconnected. So there's a lot of like puzzle pieces that started to click in where I was like, oh, all these things that I've been doing up until this point in life, they kind of all just hum and come together and create this very easy way for me to really feel like myself and offer in a way that previously I was used to teaching from a very extroverted part of myself. Anytime you're outdoor leading, there's a lot of that sort of outdoor extroverted kind of essence that comes out. But then when I was going into the yoga, it required just a softer, more introverted, more feminine place to teach from. So that was my first introduction to kind of get into the subtle. And that kept me happy for a good 15, 20 years. I mean, I moved into marriage and children after that. When COVID kind of hit down hard, I'm fitness, my husband's aviation. So we both kind of got locked in and jobs were immediately removed. So it offered me a lot of opportunity to just have my own personal time. So I went into meditation. I was already hungry for something deeper than what like an hour yoga class can offer a student. And then I was also hungry to be able to tap into people that were interested in consciousness, but not necessarily doing yoga. So all of the ways that I would take people deeper was through a teacher training or a retreat or afternoon workshop. And so I was looking for some way to kind of bring in the person that was interested, but didn't necessarily do yoga. And then that's when the Akashic Records kind of came from behind. I wasn't super familiar with them. I had a meditation experience where the name of an individual that I knew from when I grew up came to mind kind of 3 nights in a row. And I hadn't talked to her in about 20 years, but I had run into her the summer before when I was visiting my parents. And she gave me her business card and I saw that it said Akashic Readings. And I sort of thought in my mind, oh, I should book that. And then I forgot about it, put it in my wallet and left it. So it was a good 7 or 8 months later that in this time of having extra moments to meditate, her name came up 3 times in a row. And so then I don't need much more than that. So then I just reached out and I was like, look, your name's coming up in my meditation. I'm not quite sure what it means, but I have a feeling you'll know how to take it from here. And then she replied back and she was like, let's do an Akashic reading. That's actually, the cool thing about this is she says, that's actually how I advertise. I just put a petition out that my field can pull in the field of someone else that can benefit and resonate from what I have to offer. So that was cool, just knowing that was a form of advertising and marketing for business. And so I had a session with her. It was very easily revealed that I was working with the records subconsciously. And she was like, if you want to bring this into a more conscious practice, she'd offered to teach me how to read the records. And then just the teacher in me, as soon as I kind of learned how to do it, I'm a teacher of people, but I'm also a teacher of teachers. So it just was very quick. Once I went through her training, I had people kind of pinging on my shoulders saying, hey, can you teach me how to do this? And so it's unfolded from there quite easily, smoothly, naturally. It's a lot of fun.
It sounds like you're a reader. Like you read the room, you read the energy, you read the environment. You said, your young age, you grew up with 2 brothers. Got you in the field, fighter, the job you had, and then you had someone give you a book about yogi and yoga. That was a turning point. But you just said you met someone else who gave you an introduction to the Akashic Record, which was a friend or associate. I'm just trying to bring up, I'm a big person of patterns, right? And so as I'm looking at your timeline, for you're meeting people, women it seems in these cases, that are giving you something that's taking you to the next step. To the next thing in your life, your career. And I think if we can kind of just pull the curtain back just a little bit for the listeners to see how important it is to pay attention to those little subtle signs of life that brings more life, you were able to tap into that to create more life. Can you speak to that, why those little things, synchronicities, are so important for us? But most times we're missing it because you also spoke on being highly in the masculine and extroverted, right? And then you allow yourself to be in the feminine, the more allowing and more receiving. but then things coming together as one. Can you just kind of speak on like how you pay attention to the signs or the signals or the symbols to make life decisions? You know, when 2020 hit and you and your husband had to make a decision, you listen.
Really cool reflection that you just gave back to me. I'm kind of just absorbing it and seeing it from the perspective that you just offered me. So I'm going to like have a ripple effect of that afterwards, which is neat. Yeah. So I think part of what was in my favor is this is kind of the benefit, I think, of maybe being the youngest in the house. You get to sit back a little bit and see, okay, big brother did this, did not work out. Look at the trouble he got into. Look at how he got caught. Like, note to self, if I'm going to break the rules, don't do it the way he did it. And then I see other brother like, oh, okay, like really towing the line, really doing the things the way they're meant to be, but not complete because he's just denying his own essence to be able to shine. So I think a part of that is being the youngest. You just get to really observe a lot more because the bigger voices in the house, the older voices in the house, they get more attention. So I think that's a little bit to do with it. And then as I think what I knew before I understood what it was the power of presence. So, I mean, the version that I am now understands that the only place where life exists is in present moment. And the adrenals and the kidneys get exhausted when they are constantly asked to be the life force energy when we're not in present moment. And so that for me was kind of a little bit, I understood the nature of it without understanding the knowing of it. So I would watch that.
What do you call that? You're saying the nature of it and knowing it. Like, how do you, is that intuition? Is that a download? Is that just, what is that? I feel like that little hot space that you just acknowledged is so potent.
So sometimes how I learn is that I will let the current take me. So like I don't really know where I'm going, but it feels like it's on track. And then afterwards, in hindsight, when I get the opportunity like the one we're having right now, where I'm getting to look back at the timeline and see what happened. So for example, let's say at age 35, I got that information like life force only exists in present moment. And as I'm digesting that through the intellectual mind and absorbing it, the nature of your being. So this is the part of you that knows without being taught. So, and we deny this so much. And a beautiful metaphor of this is when a mother for the first time delivers and gives birth, her intellect has no idea what to do with that baby, but her nature knows.
Yes. So good.
Right? So her nature knows. And if you let your nature lead, it knows because it's tapping into a current that has been around before the mind.
If you let your nature knows, it leads. Thank you. Mic drop.
Good. I like how this is fun. This is what I noticed in your Elizabeth Ralph conversation too. You have a way of popping certain things, which is really like, if you want to talk about patterns, that's great that you do that. When I'm learning the intellect of that understanding of presence, then I can look back and be like, oh yeah, like those turns that I took that led me to getting that book from my friend. And then from there, I was like, oh, well, my body's a little bit like irritable from all the step aerobics I've done. I certainly can't do this for another decade. So what are my other options? Well, the yoga feels quite good. Then I go and I Google, this is before yoga was on every street corner, right? So this is like, I got into the teacher training just before it blew up. So when I was Googling in the Vancouver, Victoria area in BC, there was maybe 5 or 6 studios. So then I was just feeling the websites when I was looking at it. And so the one website that I got the most comfortableness and welcoming and like, this is kind of it feeling, that's how I went with it. But when I'm learning in my 30s, the comprehension of presence, I can look back at my hindsight and be like, oh, the only reason why I had the awareness to take that turn was because I was in a moment of presence and able to see what was being offered.
People listen, please tune into that frequency. The only reason she was able to make that decision, that turning point, was because she was in the nature of the moment, which was the presence to make a decision to move forward. And that's the thing that I feel like in the spiritual realm of the world, we don't know presence from that paradigm. We know it from be here now. Well, what does that look like being here now, right? And you're giving context and clues and ideology and a vision to how that book my friend gave me. And, oh, I was on a website and I was feeling what it felt like for me to make a decision because I was present, you know? And then you manifest the thing because you wasn't looking behind or ahead. You was like, how do I feel right now as speaking, right? Like, it feels great because I'm present. I'm not thinking about what's not happening. And so I think you have such I don't even know the name, a gift about the knowing. There it is. You have a gift about knowing because we're taught to believe. And I feel like you teach yourself to know from being present.
Right. So then let me expand on that, because the one piece that I think is really important for people to understand is that how we receive that is not the same for everyone. And so a lot of the teaching that I offer when I do an Akashic training is the setup before the training even starts. So when people decide that they want to come in and do a training with me, before we even get to that point, I'm having a session with them one-on-one, and we're identifying what their clairabilities are. And clairabilities it gets a little bit mystified and it gets a little bit kind of far-reaching. But here's the thing, the shamans have always known that we experience life through the senses. So when you're in your 3D form, the senses are how you relate. And to take it a step further, I believe a lot of individuals, a lot of souls incarnate just so that they can feel the senses. Yeah. I want to smell that pizza from that vendor down the street. I want to taste that sushi that I've heard so much. I want to be able to see a sunset. I want to smell the petrichor. Like, the senses are only available to us in this human form. We don't get it when we leave this body. And so much of us we outsource how magnificent the non-physical realm is. And we forget that, dude, there's like 8 billion people here. They're not all just here to create the change. That's great. Some of it's selfish. They want to experience contrast. They want to experience the senses. They want to experience time and space. They want to experience emotions, and they want to be able to make mistakes. They don't want to know, because honestly, the all-knowing could get pretty boring after a while.
To give you context on what you just said, I grew up wanting everything to be positive and great and fulfilling because I grew up in a negative environment, frequency, right? That I was afraid to make mistakes. I didn't want the contrast because I was too afraid what the outcome would be. But as I've gotten older, I allowed myself to experience life in contrast to know that there's a deeper meaning and there's perspective. And to go back to what you said, you get to a point, you have all this information, and it becomes boring because you're not allowing yourself to exist in whatever it is. And I think when we started the interview, we talked about chaos. And I've learned in my discovery that we find peace in chaos. Mm-hmm. You don't find peace in peace.
Another word for peace could be balance, right? Everyone's hunting for balance. And for me, balance is a resting place. It's not if you hang out in balance for too long, life becomes boring, right? So you need the opposite ends of the spectrum to push the growth edges, to show you the unknown, the pockets that want to be expanded into. So for me, balance is not a place that I'm trying to come into as a forever state. It's a place that I come back to. I reset, I rest. It's like, whew, feels good. And then where's the next leap coming from? Which direction am I going?
Even killing your whole Dharma experience of living. Like, what is your technique of staying not balanced, but just, not too high, not too low, but I'm here? What is it that you do? Because that's fascinating how you say you don't stay in balance. I've never heard that. I think that's great. But how do you get to that equilibrium of understand that that's okay? Something that's tangible that people can relate to or connect to and say, because like I said, for me growing up, the contrast where I was from was so common, but yet, I've been in Los Angeles for 10 plus years. I have wealthy clients and they live on. So I'm in the middle of two different perspectives, right? Where people are comfortable in contrast. Most people are comfortable in the light, where when they're dealing with contrast, it doesn't bother as much versus this side of the spectrum. But then I'm learning how to bridge the gap between both parties, just light and dark, day and night, feminine, masculine. But for you, how do you just deal with it all in such a unique way from your perspective? Toolkit, I don't know, we said meditation, yoga. I just think the way you said, I've never heard it in that lens. So it's important for people to hear more.
So I think the old version of me used to be very stoic with my practices that I would do to raise my vibration. The new version of me gets more curious with, why do I have to raise my vibration so much? What's happening in my life that I have to have 16 practices a day just so I can feel like myself? And so that's part of it, is like, let's get more curious, because we're so fixated on the green smoothie, the workout, all the things that we're doing to help keep our vibration high. And very rarely are we looking at, why the hell do we even have to raise our vibration?
Yeah, and I'm guilty of that. I've done that for years. And I got to, well, I'm just crossing it off, right? But then I realized recently, I'm glad that you said that, is that if I don't have something around my vibration or routine, my boundaries are so weak, I get distracted. And then I'm all over the place. You know, I don't know if you want to call it spiritual bypass or disconnected, but I'm here, but I'm scattered. My energy field.
Are you saying like the more things that you have going on, the more centered you can stay?
Meaning like if I'm not centered when I wake up, will start my day, the busyness will take me out of myself, my most truest self, right? And I'll just be doing because I can or because I feel like I should, versus like, hold on, let me check in with myself. Do I really want to do this? Or do I feel like I should because of my ego is taking over? Or I didn't connect with myself today to know what I should and shouldn't be doing. Like I know, but I'm so life is just happening, emails, people calling. I haven't even prayed, meditated. I didn't work out. You know, I didn't make the bed. Like I'm just off. I'm not clear in my energy field. I'm just taking on everything that's coming with no big boundaries to kind of separate them from what I want first, right?
Okay, this is fun. There's so many pieces like still that we haven't tapped into from where we started. And then I love where this is going. So I'm just going to keep rolling with it. Okay, so one thing that I want to say before I go further is one of the biggest things that has helped me, because I live in this human existence, there is no hierarchy between the contrast.
Please, listen to her. There's no hierarchy to the contrast. Where is this coming from? Gentlemen, right now? Like what? Where's the book? I need to read it. Damn. I'm sorry, but go ahead.
Yeah, so your quiet is not better than your loud, right? Your busy is not less than your stillness. So when you start to see that this is where like the mystics and the yogis and the priests, they've talked about this for years. It's the space of awakening comes from being able to hold the contrast in a beautiful paradox without favoring one over the other. It's like the breath doesn't favor the inhale over the exhale. They're both equally necessary, right? So once that started to become part of my life, then my emotions were not addicted to being in the contrast that was preferable or not being in the contrast that was preferable. And this isn't to say that you become wishy-washy and you don't have integrity or morals, but you're able to be present in the sense of, this is what's happening. And what does my meaning maker want to impose on that to make me think that it might be something that it's not? Okay. So for example, let's say I share an email with someone and it comes back to me and it is not received the way I wanted it to be received. The meaning maker in me is going to impose on that situation that person's so-and-so, or I'm so-and-so. I'm not clear. I'm not able to articulate myself. I'm not worthy. All the things that I could say to that, or impose it in the opposite way as like, that person's so stressed out. They didn't even read my email before they replied to it. So I've just made meaning and pulled myself into an egoic state that potentially has nothing to do with what went on there.
Why do we do that?
Because I think the mind works on patterns. And when a pattern works, it recapitulates it. I don't know the science totally, but like my intuition is like there's more systems in the brain set up to identify with what we think is negative, because it's a primitive way that we kept ourselves safe. Always looking for danger, risk, the things that can threaten the physical body. And so that just is continuing to play out today. Now, don't quote me on that, but that's just my...
I mean, that's really good. That happened earlier today. I DM'd someone, you can see it. People seen like 21 minutes ago. No response. So what did the brain do? I get right into this space of, and did I say, or did I just kept questioning, right?
Yeah.
And then
So that's a key point. Curiosity is like your lifeline in life. The more you stay curious, the more choice you have. The more choice you have, the more alive you feel. The more alive you feel, the more sovereign you are. It just keeps going.
Is that your thing? Is that yours? Did you coin that? That is really amazing. Curiosity, because that's in my whole life. This is how I got in this position I am today. I've been so curious about evolution and the soul and why am I here and who is this person and why do I talk like this and why do I think and where's my fears? It's out, but the curiosity.
Okay, but what you're doing that's different from, say, the person next to you, you have this capacity to zoom out, to widen the aperture just enough to make what it is that you're curious about not personal. And so when we go too close, and we go, when we're too close to it, when we're rubbing up too close, it's so personal, we can't be curious, right? So that your curiosity is like you have and this is probably, okay, so if I was in your records right now, this would probably be aligning with the purpose of your soul in this lifetime. This is a quality and an essence of your soul that came into this lifetime. And as a result, the more you tend to it, the more you get opportunities to grow and expand with the purpose of your soul because it's fluid. And then you feel more like yourself. And when we feel like ourselves, we feel more alive.
Yeah, even when I got the email for you to be on a podcast, I was like, oh, this is perfect. I don't even have to look at her.
Well, you know what was fun?
Yeah.
Most interviews is like this dithering back and forth of like, how about this time? How about that time? I got a moment 6 weeks from now, and I got this wicked email. I was like, can you do it in 2 days at 4 p.m.? I'm like, boom, we're on. Let's do it. Like that was my thing that made me feel most excited.
To talk about the Akashic Records, so the record I got a few months ago, I was told I already served my life purpose, that there's 2 paths that lead to one. One is when I'm in my head and my ego, it's hard, still gonna get me where I'm going. Or there's another one when I'm in my heart, when I'm in my spirit, it's easy and it's effortless. And I don't have to put in so much work. I put in enough work in this lifetime. I need to have fun and relax and rest, right?
So let me loop back to that because I knew this was going to happen. So what you just described is when we're talking about our clairs, and I'm saying everyone experiences present moment in a different way, and you can also experience it in all ways at once. So here's what I mean. The part of you that's in your head is probably highly connected to what we call claircognizance. That's your inner knowing. So you can make decisions from your inner knowing, and it blends with your intellect, and this is how you can do life. And when you draw in clairsentient, which is feeling the sense of touch, which is translated into clairsentient, so feeling it kinesthetically in your heart space, now you have more lines connected to the field that you can get information from. And then the next person, they become present when it's like, oh my God, all of a sudden I'm seeing the color in the room, seeing this perhaps gentle hue that's around this person in the color yellow. I'm noticing that when someone suggests this offering to me, I get these like flashes of light, and that's my yes. And then the other person might experience it through like a clair audio, which is your thought voice coming in as like it sounds like a voice in your head, but it's very same sounding as your thought voice. So most people dismiss it. So when we're trying to be in the space of more presence, when we go back to the breadcrumbs, I received the book from my friend. So I was like, perfect. Thanks for the gift. But then when I go to the website, I was feeling into which institution resonated with me. So there's ways that I'm using my clairs in different ways in different present moments. So to the listener, it's really important that when we're talking about being present, it's not just a word that we say, it's a felt experience. And so are you feeling it through the knowing of pay attention, something is happening right now. Don't disengage, don't distract, don't pick up that phone in this moment. Or are we getting the felt sense of like, this person feels so radiant and delicious, like, I just want to get closer and hang out with you for a little while longer.
Before the episode, I was doing some breath work, some deep breath work. And as I was coming up, I just had a vision of you and myself and giving you a big hug. And it was like, it gave me more confidence to come have this conversation today. It's like I already knew you. Our souls know each other, or I don't know. It just was damn, even when I was watching, I was like, this woman is powerful. More people need to know about her. Like the way you break down information with intuitive hits to, you were saying something in a podcast with Guy. I think you were saying, yeah, but where did that come from? Because I always say, where does our thinking come from? Who gave you that thought? How did it just enter into my field? Is that my thought? Is that someone else's? So for me, I already knew coming on today what it was going to be. I could feel it. It was like, I had the vision, and it was just like, you'd flash and it was a quick hug and it was Spanish and it was just smiles, right? Like, I can't explain it, but that's what I saw. And it was, and I get this way about a lot of things. I just don't speak on it enough because it makes sense to the listener or the viewer. But for you, it was like, whoever she is chosen. You just, without, there's no question marks when I'm listening. I'm like, damn, more people need to hear her because it can help you maneuver through life because we all experience life differently. And I think you make people feel comfortable with whatever that they're experiencing.
So let me piggyback on what you just said, because this is when it gets super fun.
Yeah.
So before I came on the interview, what I always do before I have any interview or I meet with any client, I take 5 or 10 minutes, I close my eyes, and because I don't have your consent to open up your records, I open up the records of the interview that we're about to have. Okay. So keepers of the records, please open the records for Eric and myself and the interview that we're about to have. Create a safe and sacred space for our highest good and healing. The records are open, the records are open, the records are open. Then I start to feel your essence come in. And then I take a moment and I just ask, any misalignments, anything that's between our souls that doesn't serve us in this moment, please erase them, transmute them. And potentially, of course, that's the same moment when you're getting the hug.
I prayed too. I said the same thing. Allow our higher self, our superconscious connect, and let me connect to the soul purpose that's in alignment of her soul for the greater good of the people listening, watching it. Come through me, let us speak, let us connect, let us dive in, like literally. Because before I do my interviews or work with clients, it's intentional. I don't just show up this way. I got a mic before, a ring light, I done prayed, I done breath work. It's a whole process, a metamorphosis before I even get to the hitting point, right? Before I get to, plate.
So then when we go back to the tools and techniques, that's one that I have in my day. I put space between the people that I meet. I don't go back to back. Number one, this body gets to move, gets to have a bile break, gets to eat. I'm not shoving something in my mouth before my next client. So I'm tending to the sacredness of this physical form. And then I'm allowing the ripple effect of whatever exchange I just had to have time to kind of integrate and ripple. And then I pause that. And then I'm like, okay, now where am I going next? And then I take a moment, just as you and I talked about, to lean into it. So my days are more meaningful, but less filled. Like rather than having 4 clients, I'll put 3 clients in so that I can get that space in between. And it comes from a very deep respect, not just for the practice, but for the person. I honestly feel there's no greater agency that we can offer another than our presence. Like your full undivided attention. Think of a small child. If they're asking for something and the parent gets low and looks them in the eye and listens to what they have to say, chances are they're just going to ask for 1 cookie, not 6, right? Because they just need that moment. Oh my God, I got it. I'm so filled up. And then off they go and they go do their thing. But when it's half-assed, and this is not to be judged, it just is because we're human. But when it's, checking a text and answering, man, my kids know when I'm doing that and they hate it. And they know that I'm half in, half out, and they roll their eyes and they throw up their arms. Then I'm just like, oh my God, you're right. Put the phone down. What is it? Let's do it. What do you want to share with me? Let's talk. And so that agency is available to everyone. It doesn't, you don't have to have any education for that. And that's, to me, when I think of the teachers that have had the most impact on me, it's the ones that know how to be present.
Yeah. And really listening to the listening. Person could be saying something, you can miss everything they're saying because you're not listening to the listening, the ear behind the voice that the voice needs to hear to understand, to give it back so they can find their own answers, right? He's speaking to me and I'm speaking back to her in a way that makes sense for her to understand, to get whatever point across and to serve that soul purpose in that moment.
When you're talking about let's get into the nuance behind it, what I'm noticing, and I'm doing it a lot today just because this is such a lively, thriving conversation, but listening without formulating your response while they're speaking. Like, how can I fully listen and just receive what it is that the person's saying while not at the same time just waiting for my turn so that I can give my reply? It's very nuanced, that little piece. There is a point that I want to lean back into that we were talking about, because it was tools for vibration. Like, what are the tools that we can have to raise vibration? And not so much to share my tools, but to share something that I don't talk about it a lot, because it's just an experience that I've had, and I haven't actually heard it shared very much in spiritual communities, but I'm talking about it a little bit more lately. And so here we are. But I allow myself opportunities to abandon practice for a couple of reasons. One, when we adhere to a particular technique, it's very easy to get addicted to the technique and assume that the technique is God, rather than letting the technique be the door that lets you into the space of source consciousness, however you describe it. And so I watch, like, even the Akashic Records. I don't, every time I meditate, open up the records, because I'm aware of how I can start to make the records the pedestal rather than the space that happens when I open the records the pedestal. So when I abandon practice, it's for a couple of reasons. One, to see if the practice is actually working. So I don't recommend this for beginners. Beginners, you're just working with your consistency. Can you drink the green smoothie every single day and see what that feels, right? Right. You're just trying to get your consistency. But for the veteran or the long-term practitioner, when you abandon practice, you get to notice if is the technique actually working. Let's say I start meditating because I don't want to be impatient as much as I usually am. So I'm trying to work on my patience. So this is why I want to start meditating. Now, I could meditate for 20 years and not even notice if my patience is getting better. So the reason why I started it's not actually working. The meditation technique that I'm using, I'm just going through the motions. It's not actually working. And then what's really cool is then we get to a point in the practice where we're like, oh, it's working. And this is super fun. Like, let's say you're 3 years in, you're like, oh my God, I've become so patient. I'm never going to give this up. And when we never give it up, then what happens is we assume that the meditation is creating the patience rather than allowing ourselves to consider the possibility that we are in a new structure, a new pattern, a new way of operating. And so even if I let go of this practice, I'm still going to remain a patient being, because this is my new body. I'm no longer that old version of myself.
Yeah, I think it's so deep, raw that you said that, because when I don't go to bed on time, I'll write on the whiteboard before I go to bed and don't do the shower, and unconsciously or consciously, I think something's wrong. But maybe spirit is telling me you don't need it. I want you to trust what you've done. Trust the work. Right. I want to bring that into cryo, right? So when you go to cryo, anyone's listening, cryo healthcare, cryotherapy, it's to like negative 220, 200, 140, negative 240, you freeze your body for 2 minutes. It's cold, right? So what I discovered even in cryo, just like to go back to spiritual practices, abandon it. When I get out the chamber, my body goes into, but am I actually cold? Or am I telling myself I should be cold because it's cold, right?
Yeah.
I'm telling myself if I don't do the practice, nothing good is going to come out of it. It's like, no, that's false. You've done enough cryo sessions. You've done enough meditation and prayer before today to know it will work if you let it, instead of being addicted to the work.
Totally makes sense. And to play devil's advocate, it can go the opposite. When like I had a student a couple of weeks ago, she was like, I'm so sorry. We've been traveling, we've been doing things. I've not done any of the practices and the things that we were working on together. She's like, I feel like I'm coming in as a failure. And I'm like, whoa. How are you feeling in this moment? What are you noticing is happening alchemy-wise in your system because you're not practicing? She's like, well, I can't focus. I've got no time. She's listing all the things that she doesn't like. So I'm like, so do you want to go back to practice? She's like, yeah. I'm like, perfect. Maybe that's why you left it. There is no hierarchy.
You got to coin that. Where's the book? Can we get the book? Hey, universe, what's the book? Oh my God. I didn't even get to some of the questions I really wanted to. This was But there is one question that I really want to ask, and I know you have the answer. How do we, in the most effortless, I don't want to say easy way, reconnect with ourself, our higher self, to feel complete and whole without being perfect or in a high vibration? How do we do that?
Well, I'm just going to flip it back on you. My motto is, how easy can it be? So whenever I feel like I'm hard edging and pushing something uphill, I just pause and I'm like, clearly I am not seeing the possibilities that are available. This is what you do great. You have this way of like sitting back and being curious and being like, is there another option here? Or what else is going on in the room? When I was sort of going through a couple of years ago, I was doing a lot of work with a coach to just bust through some money beliefs that I have. We were working on creating more income. And that was my motto, was this is not meant to be more work. So how easy can it be? So every time that I was trying to push a client to come in that wasn't ready, let them go, put my attention in another direction. Who's next? Who's next? How can I call them in? That's just what I play with, is like the easefulness has to be the recognition that how easy can it be? And it doesn't mean that some things don't require grit, and hard and for me uncomfortable are not the same thing. I can be incredibly uncomfortable moving into the unknown, playing with this new version of me that I want to bring online. But it does not have to be hard. It can be uncomfortable, but it doesn't have to be hard. And when I'm making it hard, where am I not letting support in? Where am I not letting other opinions come in to give me suggestions on how to do this in a better way? How am I hyper individualizing it and making this all about me? How easy can it be? How easy can it be? And then the other component that I would just add to that, we are 100% human and 100% divine. It's not, I don't feel it's a 50-50, meaning we're here to have the whole human experience, all of it, and the whole divine experience, not hierarchy. So when you're having a thing where it's like trying to be perfect, that's a very human part of ourselves that gets to be there. And if it's overtaking, where's your 100% divine that can come in this moment? Bring in the divine, because it's always in perfection.
So
they'll probably change tomorrow. I'll probably have a different answer tomorrow.
Yeah, I mean, that's what we're like. We're in the moment. We're present. So, this was such a great conversation about so many things. But how can the listeners, viewers, people, the universe, because your Akashic Record lady said she just puts the energy out and the right people connect. How can people connect with the soul of you, to work with you, to get more information, to improve their situation, or just to go higher in their consciousness, their mind, their body, their soul? Where can we find you?
Yeah, action is needed, right? If we just sit in the meditative space, in the formless space, we have to be able to pull it into action. So that the action for that is you can go over to my website. It's just my name, heatherivany.com. If you just want to experience more of me without any strings attached, then I have just a free program. It's the 7-day spiritual reset. And each day I'm just giving offerings on how to pull from the distraction of the periphery in towards the midline. And I also have a media tab on there that just gives you a bunch of free resources there. And then if you want to take a deeper dive, I have online self-study programs. And then my heartbeat is offering people connection with consciousness through the Akashic Records. And one-on-one mentorship are the two things that I love doing with people.
Yeah, and before we get up, because we didn't speak on it, can you just give a brief synopsis of what the Akashic Record is? Because some people call it soul readings. What do you see it as?
So I separate the two. So Akasha is a Sanskrit word that directly translates into spirit or space, which I love because space takes us into the science side, which is the study of the quantum physics, right? Spirit's going to take you into the conscious realm, the spiritual realm. So if you're more atheist, it's the study of everything, right? Space is everywhere. That's the Akasha. And then consciousness is the same. Spirit is everywhere, doesn't not go anywhere. And so that is also the Akasha. And then someone's specific Akashic Records is that your soul has a timeline of, like, if you're open to it, all the past lives that you've had, the present moment you're in, and then the timeline of the potential future that you could be moving into. So if I'm dialing into someone's Akashic Records, it's like dialing the radio frequency or the GPS signal into think of it like your energetic or divine blueprint. And then when I'm in that space, I feel the essence of your field. So everyone's field feels a little bit different. So I describe that to them. And then it holds all that information of your soul's history. So we can go where the records take us, and we can go where you want to go if you have specific questions. Most people come to me because they want to either align with their purpose or expand it and grow it in some way. My big thing is that I get real irritated with how spirituality and religion can be outsourced, and it can become pretentious, and this person's born with that skill and that person's not. It's like, dude, if you want to run a marathon, you got to train. And so if you want to be able to tap into your clair abilities, you got to work that muscle. And once the muscle's worked and opened, then you can start to play with the field more intimately. And some people already have it open, but it's so undirected that it's almost inappropriate. That's the individual that'll stop you at the grocery store and be like, I got a message for you. And it's just like, dude, I don't even know who you are. You're telling me you got a message for me? Like, that's not appropriate. So I work with people that get a lot of signals, but they have nowhere to filter it into. So the Akashic Records is a way for them to work with it.
Anything else you want to add? Can you give us some words of inspiration or something people could just focus on? And by the way, I feel like the energy in the universe is speeding up since 2024 has started. If you could just how to get people to just kind of ground themselves in the energy, and what they should just keep, constant and consistent in their existence.
I decided to do a medicinal journey a couple of weeks ago. I don't ever do these, and so we were using shrooms as the medium. And my thing was, I've been kind of hit with working with some ascended masters. So how can I mentor with some ascended masters? So ascended masters are those that have had an earthly experience, that have deceased, and now they hold a very high space in the dimensional realm. So this would be like your Buddha, Jesus, Kuan Yin, Mother Mary, Shakti, or Saraswati, like the Hindu, all the goddesses and whatnot. And I was going for the big, this is why I'm taking this vehicle, because I want to go here. And what was so fascinating is it took me deep into the earth, into my human experience. And so I think that's a missing part, is that you can go down to expand. You can get really rooted and really grounded and of this plane that we're living on, and you can go up and out. And there is not one that's better than the other. So if you're kind of scattered, you need more earth. And if you're overly practical and scheduled and following your to-do list, you need more sky. And just play the conduit between the two. It's really important to not favor one over the other, because when I get heavily schooled in earth, it opens so much more up above. But not in a negative, going through hard stuff. Like my experience was, I hold my kids at arm's length with how I love them, because it's overwhelming to me, the degree of how much I love. And so that medicine took that arm's length out, and I had this incredibly powerful experience of just feeling the human love that I have for my kids. It was very emotional, it was very powerful. But the whole time I'm like, why are my kids coming in? I'm trying to go here. And then I had to let it go. And it was because it wants to go in before it goes out and up. And so that's part of it. I think, yes, we're speeding up, of course. This is why I get more therapists coming into the Akashic training, because they're aware that talk therapy is a slower form of healing. So they want to blend it with an energetic practice so that they can have better results with their clients. I agree with you. We're speeding up. And it doesn't mean that we lose our earth while we do that.
Heather, thank you. You are phenomenal. This was amazing. People follow her, go to her website, www.heatherivany.com, correct?
Yeah. Last name is Ivany. Yeah.
So connect, share this episode. I'll put all her information in the show notes. This was another Bigger Talks conversation.
Eric, you lead and hold space very beautifully. Yeah. You are you have a very refined texture between the masculine and the feminine that radiates out. So it's a pleasure to be in your company. Thank you.